Ever wonder what secrets lie behind the walls of your home? Would you agree it's in your best interest to find out what might be wrong before you become the owner of the house? Today we're joined by Mike McLendon, a home inspector whose expertise has saved countless homeowners from unseen pitfalls. With Mike's deep dive into home inspection essentials, learn why a thorough check is your best ally, no matter if it's brand new or has seen decades pass by its windows. I'm George Siegel, and this is Homeowners Be Aware, the podcast that teaches you everything you need to know about being a homeowner. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here. We're glad to be with you and talk about some of these important issues with you today.
Yeah, there's some really important ones. So let's jump right into it and talk about, as a home inspector, what is the reason? Why should home buyers take a home inspection so seriously? Tell us how important that part of the process is.
In the general view of not just Florida based, but any potential home buyer, coming into a transaction, the purpose of a home inspection is to sort of give you a much deeper look into the home that you're getting ready to purchase. For most people, a home is the single biggest individual purchase that they're going to make in their life. And there's a lot of emotion that goes into that with it when we look for homes, when we the things we want to see happen in a home. So right off the top, just in general, when too often when we're shopping for houses and stuff, it's about neighborhoods, it's about areas, it's about design, it's about stuff that I want to see and these kind of things. And those are all important. Those are the things that end up giving us the memories and everything else that we carry with us for the rest of our life. But in our marketing materials, we say that the home inspection, we call it the moment of truth, though, and all that, where the emotion of buying a home meets the realities of what that home really is. And that's really where the home inspector comes into things in this transaction.
Now, I like to say that a lot of people are more concerned about the icing on the cake than they are the ingredients. And so I know because I've been in the position many times where you're hoping the inspector doesn't find anything. And it's really kind of the other way around. You want them to find stuff because if they don't, you're going to end up paying for it yourself.
Well, and that's true. And intellectually, most people know that they want their inspector to find something. Emotionally, they don't. Yeah, is what
Yeah.
it is. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've been doing home inspections. I've owned my home inspection business. Matter of fact, we celebrated 25 years in business last
Oh,
September. And
congratulations.
yeah, we hit 25 years. To my knowledge, I'm up in the panhandle of Florida. We're the longest continually operating home inspection company in the panhandle up here. And but it's funny, I have seen during the course of an inspection, where somebody's joining us for the inspection and they're so excited and they show up and I can see them. They've been HGTV'd to death, with all the plans that they're going to do to this place. And then during the course of the inspection, we're going, well, hey, I need you to see this. And look, we noticed this here. And there's one particular story that just has always stayed with me, this young couple. And just throughout these 3 hours, I just watched their whole countenance change. Because it was a much older house, and it turned out there were some significant underlying issues with this thing. But the reality is that even though emotionally, honestly, that this young lady, by the time we were left, she was kind of crushed emotionally, but at the same time, intellectually, she understood this would have been a nightmare. Had we come into this house.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how the process goes, you're looking for houses, you find something, you kind of fall in love, and you go, "Oh, I can see living here. Now let me check and see if it's okay." But you would never call you in when you're just house hunting because it would be a waste of time and money. I mean, you
Sure.
almost have to fall in love first and then have your heart broken.
You do, I mean, and you do, but fortunately, even the industry has changed in the time that I've been doing this, and I remember in my early days, even within the real estate industry, we weren't as welcomed as we are today. And in my early, and again, I started this in 1998. And in the early days, there were still a lot of those sort of old school people that have been in real estate for years, that saw, if you ask home inspectors, oh, they're just guys that's out there to kill deals, or they're just there to complicate things. But even through these decades, the real estate industry has grown. It's gotten educated. And frankly, my experience, it's like any industry. There are people, there are individuals in particular industries that are maybe not as above board as they need to be. But the majority of real estate agents that I deal with, they don't want there to be issues with the home. They want this transaction to go smooth, and they want that client to be very happy even in the years afterwards. So that's another thing that I've seen change is that the real estate industry are to the point where there are a lot of firms that once you sign, once you, like you say, once you see it, once you fall in love, you put your name on that contract. The first thing the real estate agent now is telling their clients is, we recommend that you get a home inspection. You
Yeah,
know,
and
and
I've had a builder that actually said, "Here's a list of inspectors I will not let on my property." And that kind of worries me then about the
yeah,
builder. I mean, yeah, maybe that man or woman inspector was nitpicky, or maybe they were just catching a lot of the builder's mistakes.
exactly. And it's funny because that's another thing that has changed. In my early days, builders would be practically offended if somebody was asking to have a home inspector come in, and they would try to throw up roadblocks to us and stuff. And I remember a couple times I would say, give me 5 minutes with a builder, and I'll get him to understand that this is a win-win for him. And this is how my conversation would go with these builders. I'd say, listen, I'm assuming that you're trying to build the best house you can build, right? He goes, yeah, of course I am. We believe in what we do, blah, 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 blah. That's fine. You're not here. You're not on this job site for every nail that's driven, every wire that's pulled, every pipe that's put in here. You're just not here for every one of those. So what you've got happening here is you have somebody else paying to do a checkup on all the subs that you're using.
Yeah.
Because if you have a subcontractor who's cutting corners, you may not know it. And you've got somebody else paying to check up on that. So where's the downside here for you? And literally they go, I never thought about that way.
Yeah,
you
I mean,
know,
it's good to hear.
and
I mean, I don't know that a
yeah,
few of the builders I've worked with would have thought that way, but because they would have
well,
thought that they
no,
were above mistakes.
well, and there is that, and there's a particular builder in our area that I'm not going to name. We're not going to do that,
Come
but
on,
they
name
have
them, name
thrown
them.
up in an incredibly, and they're a large home builder, but they've thrown up incredibly big roadblocks to us, making us increase our insurance, the liability insurance things. They say you're not allowed to get up on the roof, you're not allowed to go into the attic spaces, and they're claiming all these liability issues and stuff. But again, I'm like you, it makes me wonder, why do you not want us going there? you know.
Oh
And
yeah, you have to go in the attic. You have to go
sure
up
you
on the
do.
roof.
Yeah. And but we tell the clients, your builder is restricting us from doing this. We just want you to know that's part of our standards. But if they tell us we can't, we can't. It's their property, until they close on that house, that property that they own it. And but again, of all the builders we've got in our area, this is just one. The actual largest home builder that we have in our area welcomes us. They put up literally zero roadblocks to us. They're helping us. They want to know, are we missing anything? Tell me what's going on. We'll get right on it. So again, it's like everything in any industry. There are really good players. There are not so good players. But that's where we come in because going back to your original question, we are an uninterested third party. I get paid whether that person buys that house or not. That's it. I mean, everything ends with this one job for me. If they buy the house, great, they love me. Quite frankly, if they end up not buying the house because of what we found, they love me more sometimes because they go,
Yeah,
"Wow, you saved us from a nightmare," so. But that's what we bring to the table is everybody else, not everybody, almost everybody else involved in this transaction has a vested interest in this house closing, you know, and we don't. We
that,
don't,
that's good. And I'm glad to hear
yeah,
a good builder story because inevitably we only hear about the bad ones. Most people don't. I don't know many people that have raved about their builder, although I know there are a lot of great ones. It's the
sure.
people that are unhappy that make the most noise.
Well, that's exactly right, and it's the same way within any industry. The unhappy people, they'll tell 100 people too.
I'm the president of that team. That's my team. I live that life. Now it's interesting.
Yeah,
I met you in Panama City where we
yeah,
were shooting for our documentary film Built to Last Buyer Beware, and you educated me on something that I thought was fascinating. I'm always leery of wood houses. I think they're an accident waiting to happen, especially in Florida. But you showed me how it's possible to build wood houses that may not withstand the most powerful storms, but they sure give you a good chance. Tell us about what somebody should be looking for. And by the time you come in, it's too late. You almost have to know that they did this before the walls are closed up.
and that's true. Yeah, and with some of the things is when we shot that documentary, of course, we were in a house that was partially constructed, so while all the framing was open, but yeah, in Florida, you can almost take the state of Florida and cut it in half from north to south, and essentially from Tampa, Orlando, that kind of line up there north, the majority of home building up here is wood frame. And there are some very economic reasons for that, as far as availability of raw materials and things like that. This is the timber market for this part of the thing is all in North Florida. So wood, timber, lumber, it's just far more affordable. But the building codes that they've instituted in Florida take that into account. So a good majority of your houses, especially houses that are being built along the coast, within what we call these high wind corridors and stuff, even though they're wood frame, we're doing a lot of things that visually we were able to see is that the lumber themselves is traditionally we think of houses being built with just 2x4s, and a lot of the wood framing is 2x6s, first of all. So that just gives you a lot more stiffness. The spacing of how they run these, up and down and stuff are closer together. So essentially, the whole structure is just stiffer to begin with. But then there's the number of anchors that we're using when we build homes these days too. And so we've all if you've bought or sold in Florida or you live in a Florida house, we all heard the term hurricane clips and things like this. But hurricane clips, these kind of things, that's sort of just the minimum. That's the minimum requirement, you know. But what we're doing in newer construction and higher end newer construction, again, construction that is now required in these high wind zones and stuff, is we're anchoring these houses too, because again, it's generally when a house suffers a catastrophic failure during these hurricanes and these high wind things, it's not just the force of the wind. It's the vacuums and the pressures that can be created when a small portion of the house may fail. And maybe something as simple as a window being busted out. Within the pressures that can come on the inside of that house, start creating pressures in a direction that our building wasn't always designed for. We were building from the wind coming outside in, not inside out, and those kind of things and stuff. So, but hopefully people will watch the documentary because it'll be great to see visually. But we're anchoring all the way from the slab to the very top of the house, and it doesn't matter if it's a single story, 2 story, 3 story. We have continuous connections now with bolts and anchor rods and cables and things like that that are tied in from the very bottom of the house that go all the way through the framing to the very top. And essentially what we're trying to do is keep that house down and connected to everything. And that's going to be around the entire perimeter of the home. And so if you're, if you're in the market and say you're having a home built, if you're having a home constructed, these are conversations you should have with your builder. What are the minimum codes for my area for this? And can we exceed those codes? What would be the cost difference? Because sometimes there are some things that the cost difference can be substantial, but sometimes maybe not so much. It's a matter of a couple extra, bolts and things like this, and maybe that's worth a little bit more, to give you that extra strength.
Well, to anchor a
Um,
house like the one you showed us, where you do the foundation to the first floor, second floor, all the way up to the roof, um, that doesn't seem like that would add a tremendous amount of cost to a
I
project.
agree. Yeah, I agree with you. Probably the most expensive part of that would be the engineering plans. The actual material and labor is nothing, But it's
Yeah.
like anything, when you're submitting these drawings and stuff like that, you've got to have certified engineers do this and that, So there are some professional fees involved in that, but the actual cost of doing the work itself is from what you said, it would be minimal. It would be minimal, but it's the kind of thing you have to plan up. Again, this is, if you're in where you're having a house built, it's a thing you've got to have those conversations early because you've got to get in the plans. It's harder to somehow in the middle of it go, oh, I want to do this, kind of thing. Possible, but probably a little more difficult. One of the other things too that we're doing is because we talked about the impact and the failures too is our openings again. And believe it or not, the weakest part of all our construction, whether it be wood frame construction, whether it be masonry construction, block, those kind of things, the weakest part of it are our openings. We have to go in and out of houses. We got to have doors. We got to have windows. We want light. We want all of those things. And we don't want to live in a tank. Nobody wants to live in a tank, and which would be the safest, right? But but we always got to have that balance. So our openings are another thing that there are things you can do to strengthen those openings. In the house that we looked at, they were using what we call impact rated windows. So those windows are rated for what in Florida, what we call a large missile impact rating is what they're called. And essentially what that means in real life is for it to pass that test, they shoot a 9-pound 2x4 at that thing. And I want to say it's like 30 miles an hour and it's got to withstand it.
Hmm.
And same thing with doors, entry doors and stuff. Even solid doors have to have a certain impact rating. We tend to think of windows and stuff, and this is where a lot of consumers. I've talked to home buyers, and they go, "Oh yeah, I've got hurricane windows," and unfortunately, people use those terminologies, and oftentimes windows can have wind ratings, which means this window is designed to withstand a certain mile per hour wind, but it may not be rated for impact. And so they're two different things. And
Hmm.
very often, again, salespeople, whatever, oh, it's hurricane window,
Sure.
hurricane winds, they may be, but some people think sometimes they're more protected than they really are within, they're not maybe not impact rated. And there's other ways to provide impact rating too if you're in an existing home. Um, and you want to, because the question I get, well, what can I do? I'm in an older home. What are things I can do to strengthen my home? Because I can't clearly rebuild it. I can't go do all these things from the get-go here. But one of the easiest ways things that we can do is to strengthen our openings. You can do it by replacing your windows with impact rating. Um, They have rated, if you've lived in Florida, you've seen people with coverings and different things that they cover their windows and doors with that can add that impact protection and stuff. And those are nice because they're things you can put on and take off. They don't have to be on there 24/7. So one nice thing about hurricanes, they typically don't sneak up on us, so we have time to prep and prepare for them.
So one of the criticisms I've heard of wood, and again, I don't, market myself as an expert. It's just the people I talk to, and I try to, get the best
Right.
information possible, is because of the termite problem that we have in Florida, that when you have a wood structure, and whether it's siding that's on there or stucco, whatever you cover it with, once water gets in there, then you get rot, you get mold, you get termites. And that seems to be the bigger concern and why they say block is in a lot of instances better. What are your thoughts on how you have to maintain it if you do have a wood house?
Yeah, and again, if cost is not an issue, if everything's an even playing field, the answer is a block house probably better? My answer would be yes. It is. It is. But costs are a factor. They factor into every part of everything we do in our lives and stuff. So yeah, so it's like anything. Block homes can also get termites, and they can get water, and they can get all those kind of things. The first two homes that I owned were in Jacksonville, Florida, which is North Florida, but they were both concrete block homes, you know. But my roof and structure and everything wasn't. And in both of those, I had termites up in my roof,
Nice.
Termites they're determined little buggers, there's a will, there's a way. So that's an issue for all of us. But you're right that, once you introduce water to wood, you're creating the environment for termites, because again, termites need two things to survive, like anything. They need food and water. Unfortunately, food is a lot of the materials we build with. So our defense is to keep water away. And again, so again, the answer to the question in very basic is preventative maintenance. You keep up, you keep your house treated. There are very effective termite treatments out there today. And typically, most termite companies, once you have a house treated, they will offer a bond, which is like an insurance policy, to come along with it. So once they treat it, they're bonding you against future damage, and as long as you maintain your treatments with them, even if you were to end up getting termites or having damage done, they would be obligated to make the repairs or for those. And it's like anything, have it inspected regularly. It's so what it boils down to in a short answer is it's preventative maintenance, and keep up with what you're doing.
Now, if you walk around your house with a thermal camera, would that show you maybe where there's water intrusion or that there's some kind of something going on behind those walls? Is that any value?
It is a value. It's not X-ray. It's not X-ray. So a thermal camera shows basically the surface temperature when you're looking at it, and even some of the most powerful ones. And again, the thermal camera that a home inspector is going to have, or somebody that's doing that kind of stuff, is not going to be these 20, 30, 40, $50,000 cameras that you see in all your military videos that you watch.
Hmm.
So they're going to be limited in their scope, but they could identify a significant problem. We use thermal cameras in our inspection. Not every home inspector does, but it's an option that we do. And it can very easily, a thermal camera probably can't show you, well, look, you've got termites right there. If it did, it would be pretty much a massive infestation that probably you would have found anyway. But what a thermal camera can do is it can alert you to moisture problems, going back to your earlier question about getting water into things and stuff. Because as materials get wet, if we're getting water intrusion into that cavity between the outside of the house and the drywall that we see on the inside, if you're getting water in there, that water is changing the temperature of whatever it's touching. And that's what an infrared, that's what a thermal camera does. It sees temperature. So it can sometimes very well be clue us into an area that we've got a substantial temperature difference in this wall right here. And that needs to be investigated to figure out why. Why is this happening here?
Okay, no, another problem I have that I've seen happen because it's happened to me and it's happened to me in multiple houses that I've owned is that whoever built it did a half-ass job on engineering it for air conditioning and heat. So certain rooms get warmer, certain rooms are colder. And for example, the office that I'm sitting in right now, I had to put a split system air conditioning unit in it because the temperature was always 4 degrees warmer than the rest of the house. And some people will go, that's not a big deal. Well, if you keep your house at 78 degrees and your office is at 82, it's a very big deal.
Sure it is. Yeah, yeah.
How do you catch those things?
And again, that would be something that would be difficult during the course of a normal home inspection. Um, uh, to be quite honest, that's probably something that is not going to be caught. That would be outside of our scope of expertise.
Yeah, I've never
And
caught it.
no, no, no. Now, if you were specifically wanting to check that, you would probably have to hire an HVAC company to go in and do that. And it's a good thing for me to let you know, and to let your viewers and listeners know too, because as a home inspector, I come into a house. We have roughly about 3 hours is what
Yeah.
about how much about what we spend in an average size house. And so here's what I tell people: as a home inspector, we have to be a little bit of an expert in a whole bunch of different trades. I'm not a licensed roofer. I'm not a licensed electrician. I'm not a licensed plumber. I'm not a licensed HVAC guy. We have to know a little bit enough about those trades to identify major concerns and issues and things like that. So what we do, and I will tell you in the course of my time in doing home inspections, in the course of a home inspection, though, sometimes you just walk into a room and you instantly go, this room seems warmer. I feel it. Um, am I obligated under my standards of practice to note that in my home inspection? Probably not, because I can't specify why. There could be a lot of reasons, but it's an easy enough thing to say this needs to be further investigated.
Yeah, I wish
And
everybody would do that. I mean, that cost me a
yeah,
lot of money to fix that.
sure, yeah, yeah. But even and again, I'm not trying to defend the different trades or anything like that. But the reality is you can do the best formulas because typically on this specific issue with an HVAC system, there are formulas they use: square footage of a house, cubic feet, this and that, and it's just a math formula that they use as far as how they lay that out. But then you get into the specifics of a room and sometimes just where the sun comes in and too often what will happen is that plan gets done during the planning stages. And this is probably the most common cause of like a situation that maybe you're in. But then during the course of building, they go, oh, we want this wall moved over to here or there, and they make some slight adjustments, not understanding the cascading consequences that it can happen too.
Man, you're a lot
Um,
nicer than I am. I think they're saving money and they go, okay, let's just throw this together. But I like your attitude a lot better. I think you have a better approach. Now tell me about the My Safe Florida Home program and how people can utilize that when they're buying a house.
Yeah, now the My Safe Florida Home is something that Florida has. It's actually not new. It actually came back. It originated back in the 2000s. There was a year, I don't remember the exact year. There was one year where they had four major storms crisscross across Florida, and it just was devastating. And um, and afterwards, they instituted this, and it was a program to help homeowners strengthen, or they used the word harden their homes against storms. So it's gone through a number of iterations, and then of course the economy went bad and the funding went away for it. So it never really went away, but it sort of was dying on the vine out there because there was just simply no money in the budget for it. But over these last couple of years, the government here in Florida and the legislator has made it a priority to fund it. And so the My Safe Florida Home program is a program where, first of all, they've got their website. I think it's just My Safe Florida Home, that you can go to. You can register, and the first thing you can do is you can get a free home inspection. Now, it's not the kind of home inspection that you would do when you're purchasing a house, but it's an inspection specifically designed to identify ways, things in your home that you could do that would strengthen or harden your home against hurricanes and high wind events. So it gives you a roadmap. And just for full disclosure, I'm not doing that. I don't work for the My Safe Florida program, and I don't get any work from them. So everybody's clearing that. But it's a free resource that's out there for any resident in the state of Florida, first of all. And then, depending on the funding levels, like right now, before we started here, the legislature just authorized another $176 million to it. But the program right now is at a standstill because that additional 176 million was allocated to fund the applications that are already been submitted. And so at this exact point in time right now, they're not taking new applications. There's tens and tens of thousands that are already in there. But it's a good program to keep an eye on because here's what's great about the program. If you do certain these things. And when we say certain things, we're talking about new types of roofs, putting in hurricane clips, impact windows, all these different things that we've been talking about that you can do. If you do some of these, you can actually get grants to offset the cost. They're not paying for all of it, but I think I want to say, if I remember, they will sometimes pay up to half of what the costs are and stuff. So it's a great resource that's out there. And like I say, even if they're not, if you're at a point where you go, oh, I've just heard about this, but they're not taking, you can still get the free inspections and at least for you, give you a roadmap. And you might go, oh, well, this is something I could do, or we could do this and we could do that. The other benefit that comes with this is of not only obviously just making your house far more prepared for a hurricane, but it can also garner you significant discounts on your homeowner's insurance.
Yeah.
One of the things we do here in Florida when you go to insure your house, most of our insurance companies ask for what we call a wind mitigation inspection form done, and the entire purpose of this form is to see if you qualify for certain wind credits in a house. So if you're living in an older home and you don't have hurricane clips, that's not an incredibly difficult thing to retrofit, and it's not horribly expensive. If you were to add hurricane clips to your house, you could have a wind mitigation done showing have this, and just that one thing in some instances can reduce your policy by $1,000 or more a year at times and stuff. So these other things, even if you're not getting state money or what have you, some of these improvements can more than pay for themselves in the reductions you'll get in your homeowner's insurance too.
Yeah, everybody should really think about what they need to do to make their home as safe as possible because as they'll see in our film, they could see in my last film, The Last House Standing, when you become a victim of a disaster and you've lived that yourself um,
Yeah.
after Hurricane Michael, it's a long road back, isn't it?
It's a long road back. We had in Hurricane Michael in 2018. I live in an older home. My house was built in the 80s. So in the 80s, there weren't certain requirements that are here today. And we suffered fairly catastrophic damage, on our home. And probably my home to be completely put back together was almost a year. It took me just shy of a year to get everything back to where it was before. And it's not fun. Yeah,
No, it's not. And
not,
I'm always
it,
crushing insurance, the insurance industry. But you actually had a good experience, as you told us, but it still took a year.
it still took a year. Yeah. And so, yeah, I was fortunate. I mean, honest to goodness, the insurance company that I was with, I didn't have to battle them. I didn't have to argue with them. Their gesture came out. He missed some stuff. We did a supplemental claim and they didn't dispute anything that I was asking for. So again, I was fortunate in that, but yet still the biggest problem that you suffer during a hurricane is it's not isolated. Your issue is not isolated. And
Yeah.
so that's what makes it like just a couple, talk about bad luck here. I don't know if it had happened when you were here, but in January, I think it may have been right after, I don't remember the date we did,
The ninth, I
but
think it was.
yeah, I got hit by a tornado.
Yeah. Did you have damage
And
from that? Your house was, did you come
I
out
did,
okay?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Matter of fact, tomorrow I have another roof being installed. I have new roof being put on tomorrow, you know.
Well, we
So,
saw that house in Panama City that tipped over.
yes, that's right. That's right. Okay, I couldn't remember our time. That's right. It had just happened. It had just
Yeah.
happened. But but yeah. But what's been different this time, and it's been interesting because we're talking 5 years apart here. You know, it's almost comical. I've been a native. I'm a native of Florida. I've lived here literally my entire life. I'm in my 60s, and I've been through hurricanes before, but the Hurricane Michael in 18 was really the first time I suffered any real damage. And then, 5 years later, I got tornado damage.
That was
I
quite a
guess I'm
tornado. And,
used,
and the path
yeah,
that it took, I mean, we saw some houses that were just obliterated by it. They were older.
yeah, yeah. And again, I was very fortunate because even though my claim was still a little substantial, structurally, I had no structural damage this time. But again, I, I garner some of that too, some of the upgrades that I did in putting my house back together after Hurricane Michael,
Yeah.
because I took some of those steps to strengthen it, some of the framing and things like that. As we were putting our house together, we upgraded, exceeded what were the codes back in the 80s, when my house was originally built and things like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
the biggest struggle, and kind of going back, and I know we're going to circle a little bit, but the reason these are such good investments up front is when you are trying to do repairs after a significant hurricane event, just the availability of materials, of contractors and scheduling and things like that, just make the process that much harder. So whatever you can do up front to keep yourself from having to be in those positions is so much better.
And a reason that building codes matter. I had a recent podcast guest, Roy Wright, IBHS, where they do safety tests of structures, and
Yeah,
he showed us that the newer codes can save a lot of houses from tornadoes. Maybe not an EF5 that rolls right over your house,
sure.
but the one that hit Panama City, certainly the older structures took it a lot worse than the newer ones.
Absolutely. And even in Hurricane Michael, that was what was striking to me as I drove around and I drove through. Because again, I've been inspecting now in this area for 20 plus years, right? So, these are the older neighborhoods, these are the newer construction neighborhoods and stuff. And as I went through, just drove through those neighborhoods, you could see very distinctive differences to the level of destruction, and as the newer homes. Again, were there some catastrophic failures of newer homes? Yeah, there were, but there were much fewer of them than there were of older
Yeah,
homes.
that's
So yeah, exactly right. Yeah, building codes do make a difference.
it's awful to see that kind of damage. So let's wrap this up with some action items for people. I'm getting a house, buying a house, new, old, whatever. What should I look for in a home inspector? What should I want to have a feeling of as I'm hiring that individual?
Okay, so when you're interviewing a home inspector, here's some questions you answer. Of course, the first obvious question: are you licensed? Make sure he's licensed. I mean, that sort of seems obvious, but make sure he's licensed. Make sure he carries E&O insurance. E&O stands for errors and omissions insurance. Okay. And that's an insurance there to protect you in case he does a bad inspection. We carry it. We are not required by the state of Florida to carry it. It's an option. So something they should carry. Two, will he let you come along during the inspection? You've got a home inspector who says, no, I don't want you there. Talk to someone else. Just talk to someone else. You need to be able to have conversations. Now if he says, "Well, I don't want you there for the whole thing. I want you to come near the end," that's fine. Because you get old Gabby, he's trying to get his work done. That's fine. You don't want to distract him. But you want a guy that you can have a conversation with and that you can ask questions to, and he's willing to take the time to explain to you what your concerns are. And number two, And the last thing too is make sure you tell him what your concerns are. One of our standard things when we're booking an inspection, when we're talking to the client, they give us the address, blah, blah, blah. And then one of the questions we always ask is, was there anything in particular during your walkthroughs of the house that you were concerned about? Because sometimes they're silly things, and that's okay. But we want to know, what are your concerns? What is it that which you did your walkthroughs? Did you see anything you went, ooh, what about that? And so these are the kind of things. And if they're not willing to have those kind of conversations with you, there's plenty of guys that will.
Yeah, and guys, and men and women, we want to say that
Of
because I've
course,
had
yes,
female inspectors
yes.
on that. Man, I'd be afraid of if I was a builder because those ladies are tough. Um, it's
Absolutely.
it's an important job, and you really don't want to throw that away. So hopefully people will heed this advice. I mean, that's great information. And then the typical cost of an inspection, usually the range would be what?
Probably, I'd say on average in Florida, you're probably looking between $500-700. There are different variations that typically this how big your house is going to be more, smaller houses, different add-ons, different services, things like that, but probably in that range.
And people should also understand, don't gloss over problems because if it's a problem when you're looking at it in the beginning, it's probably going to be a problem down the road. And
Absolutely.
those things don't fix themselves, do they?
That is correct. That is correct. And they never get better. They may not
Yeah.
get worse, but they usually do.
Yeah, I think I can attest to that. So, hey, Mike, thank you so much for coming on today. Your contact information, how people can reach out to you, it'll all be in the show notes of the podcast. But I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. It's great.
I know a lot of you have stories, good and bad, about your experiences as a homeowner. There's a contact form in the show notes. Fill it out, and I look forward to having you on a podcast to share your story. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.